All right, welcome back, commissioners, and back to you, Chair Hinton.
Great. Welcome back to the work session of the Washington County Board of Commissioners, Tuesday, March 7th, 2023 in the afternoon. We're going to pick back up with item number 3, consider applicants for Housing Advisory Committee. Welcome, Mr. Calabar.
Good afternoon, Chair Hinton and Commissioners. My name is Convene Meeting, Housing Director. I want to acknowledge Jacob Boyette in the audience. He's my colleague. He did a lot of the work on this. So as you know, the Housing Advisory Committee is a committee that you appoint, your board appoints to oversee many of the housing work. There's 15 members in total, 4 of them at large, and the rest from various disciplines such as real estate, development, construction, architecture, banking, finance, social organization, elderly representative, and then and so we have 6 vacancies on our 15-member board. We received 11 applications, and the matrix is in your packets. And so we are recommending 6 of the applicants, of the 11 applicants for appointment. First one is Ryan Kane. He's a real estate and development and construction professional. Haley Purdy, she's Scott Edward Architects. David Bachman, property manager. Tina Castrihon, social service organization. Bruce Dickinson, elderly representative. He's a finance professional too, but I think he's retired from is he First Tech or Advantage Credit Union? Yeah, and Fernando Lira is a finance professional. With that, we'll take questions you may have.
Commissioners, we have a great roster and a really terrific roster of recommendations. Does anyone have any questions on the recommendations made for these appointments?
Just a quick comment. I like the balance.
District 4. Thank you.
Balance.
I'm sorry to see Alma leave and relocating. Alma's a great asset to our community. So.
Yes, I think she's relocating to Minnesota, a
That's
town outside Minneapolis.
She's been around this area for a long time.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a family move, so we miss her.
Good for her.
Yeah, I thought that was on the wrong tab.
Okay, is everybody all set to move forward? Terrific, great. Thank you for all that setup work. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
Commissioners.
it. Yep. Okay, now we're going to dive into the state legislative session and the update with our wonderful team. We have here in the room with us today, Aaron Doyle and Tracy Rainey from Washington County and Clean Water Services respectively. And we know there's a lot to talk about. Will we have soccer on Zoom?
Hopefully.
Wonderful. If we can get, hello there, soccer. Thank you for joining us. We know there's a lot happening and it's great to have 2 of the 3 of you in person because we know it's hopping busy.
Yeah.
So take it away.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. Aaron Doyle, your Senior Government Relations Manager here with the GR team internal. Just to give you this week's update, I'm sure it'll all change tomorrow. And remember how a clicker works? Maybe.
Is it on?
I don't know.
There you go.
There we go. Now it is. That's how it
Or is
works.
somebody in the back room doing that? No?
I've got it. I turned it on. So today it'll just be a quick session overview, and then we'll go over the hot topics and priorities. Those are first the priorities and then the hot topics that have been added on. And then just a reminder of what the calendar looks like. This slide is out of date. I forgot to update the number of bills, which I looked at this afternoon. It is now 2,858 bills that have been introduced. Certainly not tracking all of them, so please don't ask. But we're going through them. They keep adding more bills to the stack that have more creative ideas, and they are starting to get into period of time where they can only do what are called priority bills, which are, you have an urgent request that came up, they still have to meet all the timelines. But it should see a significant drop off in the number of new bills that come forward. The legislature is still going through their 60-day goals of getting the housing package, the initial housing package and the semiconductor package put together. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's still, we are in week 8, apparently. Someone mentioned to me that on Friday, we will be a third of the way through the session, not that I'm counting days. So I don't think they hit their 60-day target, but they are hitting their targets for getting those things done. They are also at the beginning of the budget process for the state, where they are starting to go over the governor's recommended budget requests for each state agency. So it's like 3 days of presentation and then 1 day of public comment. So on to priorities and hot topics. First, we're going to cover, Dr. and I are going to bounce back and forth and cover the county priorities. And then Tracy will talk about clean water services priorities. And then we'll get into the hot topics that the county is also tracking based on conversations that we have had with the board. So I'm going to start here because we failed to do a run through between Dr. and myself. But I'll just start here on the first priority that the board adopted is stabilized and sustainable funding for services that we provide. And that is where we are paying attention to the state budget bills. And our concern is that the state has indicated that they are looking at the potential still for a cuts budget for some of the state agencies. So we are tracking down every cent that we get out of the state to provide the services and making sure that that's not where the cuts happen. Zucker, do you want to provide a little more context or information there?
Yeah, happy to. For the record, my name is Zakir Khan, Government Relations Manager here at Washington County. What I have kind of been told in conversations that I've been privy to over the past couple of days is that we're really going to probably see a lot of continuing service levels across the board when it comes to the budgets for agencies. Despite the perception of the revenue outlook, because of escalators that have happened within construction contracts due to inflation, there's a lot of covering or the adjustments that need to be made to cover those construction costs. So that's just one note that I wanted to flag as people have a perception as to how the budget takes form.
The next priority the commission adopted was to secure state investment for supporting local economic development and job creation, i.e. gain share, is the primary focus. We have 2 bills. We were hoping to wrap them into the semiconductor package, but the picture is looking very much that they will go separately. So as you all know, Commissioner Treese did go and provide testimony on Senate Bill 537, where we said it's not just an extension, but really a modernization that is needed. We are continuing to work that process. How that works out is it will go through the Senate Finance and Revenue Committee and then go to a joint committee where they take on all of what they call tax expenditures and balance what they're willing to pay for. And that's tax credits and programs like gain share. So there will be further work that we have to do. It's joint between the House and Senate and then go straight to the floor from there.
So this is where I would like to ask a question for your commentary. Because I may be overly skeptical. Thank you, Commissioner Treese, for sharing your talking points. I did read them. I did see, the word modernization and the word cap as well. But what I'm afraid of is that the committee members or the legislators in general are only thinking about that cap of gain share and 16 million, as opposed to the table that was in their gain share SIP 101 of greater than $1 billion of total investment is the initial taxable portion is capped at 100 million. It's that table that I've been particularly bothered by for SIP, because that was defined in the 1990s. And so whereas Echo Northwest represented that table, they didn't highlight it was defined, adopted, and remains at the 1990 level. So
I will.
Maybe
there are conversations that are taking place that weren't, because the focus.
I didn't watch that.
Yeah.
February 27th.
the focus for that hearing was really to connect gain share back to the SIP as opposed to,
Yes.
because the bill is focused on
Yeah.
the gain share. So that was really why gain share is an important part of the strategic investment program. We are having those conversations in other conversations looking in the semiconductor task force, but I would also, or sorry, the joint semiconductor committee, the task force is over there.
Yep.
The other piece of it that has been part of that conversation is leaving us room to negotiate with any SIP agreement that there can be taxable portions on top of that 100 million. That's just the state's standard. We can negotiate the contract beyond that. And so I think that's part of the overall conversation about what we need to be able to do and the flexibilities we need to be able to have, because there are multiple things that we negotiate within a SIP agreement about what they will pay for and how much they'll be paying. And those are conversations that the board will guide when and if we have another investment conversation.
Okay.
But it is not off the table, all modernization. Looking at the community services fund, that cap also of $2.5 million. They have incrementally changed that over time. There's room for that. That's just an automatic, you have to pay this piece of it, but everything else is also a piece of the negotiations that you all direct staff to have with.
That's the assurance I needed.
Yep.
Thank you.
We are aware that we continue to face the regular headwinds that gain share has always faced from folks who are concerned about the impacts to the education budget. We are working on putting together those very specific and explicit talking points about when we bring in over $100 million in additional general fund to the state, we more than fill that state school fund bucket. So that is where we are on the gain share extension. I'm going to turn back to Zakir to talk about our policies to support recruitment and retention of talent.
Thank you, Erin. So an update on 3 to Thrive is the bill package is looking really good right now. We're undergoing final amendments on 2 of the 3 bills, and we've been told that there's a high likelihood that that most if not all of the bills will move, which I think is a really speaks to the volumes of collaboration that happen internally to really propel these bills forward. So that's a bit of optimistic news that I have to share with you. Still working on some fine tuning on especially the last bill, House Bill 2652, but I think we're getting to a really good place on those bills. The second kind of aspect of things I wanted to talk about was the interstate compact bills. So there were 2 bills brought forward this session that deals with interstate compact bills in the fields of occupational therapy and within nursing. So just to provide some background, interstate compact bills essentially create license reciprocity between different states that allows for potential applicants from one state to move to another state very easily. So, when you have an economic development sector that's growing like ours in Washington County, and you potentially have additional jobs coming in, when people are bringing their partners in with them, if they have licensure reciprocity, it makes, it creates 2 jobs rather than just one. And when people are looking to move states, they see, oh, there's licensure reciprocity, I can get a job there, and I don't have to do additional requirements, then that's helpful for a potential applicant. So those bills were heard in the House Healthcare Committee. The occupational therapy bill, I think, had no opposition to it. The nursing bill had opposition to it. The hospitals were in favor of the compact, and the Nurses Association was against the compact for a multitude of different reasons. But I just wanted to flag this as a conversation that is ongoing within the legislature. It may evolve into the behavioral health space as well. And then the third thing is, and this really is tied to the interstate compact in some ways, is reducing administrative barriers. Critically, the legislature is examining how to reduce administrative barriers upon practitioners, so that one, we can get more productivity out of workers who might have to do kind of less documentation, thus boosting, who can provide services and how they can provide services to communities. And then second, looking kind of administratively or on the licensure level as to what barriers need to be reduced so that we get more applicants to go in these fields. So there's a bill up this week, later on this week, that I'm working with our behavioral health team on that specifically aims to examine this in the behavioral health sector. So it's going to be something that we continue to work on to really ensure that we get more practitioners into the field and that we also retain those workers, because some of these administrative barriers and burdens are burning out workers. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Erin.
Thanks. The last bullet point here is related to the LUT staffing issues that are ongoing. I just noticed the typo because it's in large print. It's House Bill HB 3174. It's up to-
HH was a new
Yeah,
designation.
it's just a brand new bill numbering system. That bill is going to be heard on Thursday. We will be working with a group of stakeholders to support it, but basically is creating capacity that the state can put out into regions as we all address the basically shortage of workers who can do the permitting and land use application processing and trying to create that force of technical assistance, that workforce, which is also a major barrier here in Washington County. So it's happening on all levels. We're hopeful that the conversation around the budget still leaves room for the payment for all of these types of really important and vital supports to our workforce and the work folks that we need to bring on board. The last two county priorities are related to fiscal investment in capital construction. The Oregon Judicial Department budget does include $1.25 million or $2.5 million for courthouse planning for Washington County. It's included in the base budget request. We will be submitting testimony on that at their public hearing on Thursday. Other things that are included in that judicial department budget include increased funding for law library and conciliation services. So it will be a more comprehensive set of testimony in support of all of those minor increases, but those dollars becoming available for the courthouse is incredibly important. Zucker, you want to talk about the CAT?
Yeah, so we're just in the active process of seeking a really chief kind of sponsor to push forward on the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment capital construction budget request. We have a number of interested parties. It's just about getting meeting time and really nailing that down. But I think there's a lot of interest from the entire delegation as I've been speaking to them about making sure that this request gets fulfilled and gets funded. So seeing that excitement there and seeing how our caucus will potentially push on this has been really significant and noteworthy. And it's just about identifying the principal actor who's going to be pushing this forward.
And that might be a place where, Chair Harrington, when you have your meetings next week, we might be asking you to add that to the list of asks. So
Happy to.
that is how we are asking you for help today. Next, I'll turn it over to Tracy to talk about clean water services.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Tracy Rainey. I'm Senior Policy Analyst at Clean Water Services. Thank you for allowing us to provide this update, Chair Harrington and board members. So I'm going to spend my time today focused on the board adopted state legislative priorities that you will recall from December. It's been quite busy and we are, I think, really encouraged that we're seeing a lot of good progress made on some of the initiatives that we were looking forward to working on this session. The first one I want to touch on is reuse, House Bill 3231. I believe that you already heard during your leadership update today that there is a hearing on this bill scheduled for this afternoon at 3 o'clock in the House Ag, Land Use, Natural Resources and Water Committee. It used to be just the House Water Committee, and that was easier to say. And we will have Jared Kinyer, our water reuse manager, testifying from Georgia today on that bill. So we're really looking forward to that. This bill was introduced in part and in response to conversations that we had with Representative Ken Helm, as we highlighted some of the needs that we have and our plans for expanding and further promoting reuse in our basin. So really good news to see. What the bill does is it provides additional resources for DEQ. They only have one FTE right now for the reuse program, and that person does other things as well. So this will provide them with additional FTE that will allow them to update their regulatory framework, which has been, we've been hoping to see that for some time. It's also going to provide some technical resources to communities to help them engage in reuse projects. And so we're really hopeful about the bill. We are hearing the potential that this legislation and those pieces that are contained in the bill may be folded into a comprehensive drought package, which I think would be really good news. So we are working with Representative Helm on that potential opportunity going forward. Enhanced PFAS research. This bill had a public hearing last week. We've been working really closely with the Association of Clean Water Agencies on this language. This would provide funding for a state study to look at the fate and transport of PFAS related specifically to land application of biosolids. There's a lot of national studies that are happening right now, but the industry wastewater professionals in Oregon saw the need for Oregon-specific data. We are a little unique in what we're seeing in PFAS so far in our sampling. So this will provide us more specific data. That's going to be really helpful in informing our ability to do source reduction work, and also to understand where additional investments are needed. And really what we want to see is that the science and the data is there to inform policy decisions going forward. House Bill 3125.
Question on that. before.
Yeah.
I've been curious since we do a lot of land application at Madison. We've been doing that for years. What will this really mean to us? I mean, is this just studying, or are we going to potentially have to try to remove those very fine particles out of our waste stream, or are we not going to be able to use land application of our solids? Or I guess I'm not sure where this is all going.
Yeah, I can help with that. The outcome of the study is to show that Oregon has good science, that the biosolids land application is a good practice here in Oregon. But there are other parts of the country where PFAS significantly impacts the biosolids, and there's been some bans on biosolids land application, like in Maine and some other places. But to here, it's to provide the good science that shows that we're all applying it
So
appropriately.
no damage at this point, just study.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Is that helpful?
That's very helpful, yes, and that's a great question. And we are working really close with agricultural users as well. And I think, again, just with what we've seen nationwide, everyone's looking to have really good science here in Oregon. OSU would be conducting that study, and we've worked really closely with them and think that they're well positioned to provide that good science. And my computer just locked up, but of course. We don't need it. Okay, so
There's my name.
there's thank you. Low income water assistance. So that's House Bill 3125. There was a public hearing on Valentine's Day. And we did provide testimony in support of that bill. And actually, we've been playing a leadership role in advancing that legislation. As you may recall, there was federal funding provided for the first ever low income water and sewer rate assistance program that came out of 2021 through CRF and ARPA dollars. Washington County Community Action had just over $900,000 to provide to low income households that were struggling to afford water and sewer bills. Those funds were initially released in February 21 to households, and they were spent down by May. So just within a few months timeframe. Without additional funding, this program that was stood up by OHCS will not be able to continue past this fall. So we are making that case. It was a good hearing. There was a lot of support for the bill. I think the big question is where is the sustainable funding resource going forward on this? And so we're engaging in those conversations as well. We are characterizing this as a one-time supplemental funding just to keep the program going. On water utility responsiveness and resiliency, House Bill 3016 is a bill that we are engaging in. It would provide some funding to further promote green infrastructure solutions. And also contains some funding to respond to emerald ash borer, which is something that we are tracking closely as it has an impact on our riparian shade program. So we've been working on that language with some of the sponsors that are looking to advance that legislation.
Can you define what a drought package is? What's that mean?
Oh, yes. And I should note that a lot of the conversations in water and where particularly some of our priorities lie, there's a lot of conversation about folding it into the comprehensive drought package. So again, what they're looking at, and again, I don't want to, things change so frequently, as Aaron mentioned, but they are talking about a pretty significant investment in a variety of tools that will help communities be better prepared to respond to drought. And that would include potentially things like green infrastructure solutions that may help them adapt and mitigate from drought impact as well. So there's a lot that may be folded into that package, and we're kind of waiting to see which bills end up being included in that comprehensive piece of legislation. Okay. Just a few more of our priorities to cover. Water-related infrastructure investment. We already did talk to the board about the opportunity for seeking lottery funding for Fern Hill. to do some of the expansion work that we are hoping to achieve out for Fern Hill Wetlands. So we've had that conversation with Representative McLean, and we will see, I think, towards the end of session, if we were successful in that. The drought package, again, I had to put on there because I think there's going to be some considerable investments in water infrastructure within that legislation. Conversations about how do we position communities in Oregon to better take advantage of federal dollars that are coming through, where the state might be able to provide some additional match. On the DEQ water quality permitting program, as already mentioned, the governor's recommended budget included cuts. There are certainly cuts to the water permitting program that we're concerned with. Again, what we want to make sure is that DEQ is positioned to provide timely and quality permits. And so keeping that program whole to get those permits out the door and to have them be quality permits that we can implement and that are cost effective is really important to us. That budget will be up in early April and we'll be engaging and providing testimony. We have provided testimony twice now on Senate Bill 4. So this is related to the water infrastructure readiness for industrial opportunities. Again, just carrying forward that message that we need to be included and that there needs to be coordination upfront to make sure that the water infrastructure, along with other infrastructure, is there and ready. We can't just build that infrastructure and hope that someday there will be industry sited. We need to know what it is that we're building for. And so we want to partner with the state, with the federal government to have the resource that we need to make sure that we can be responsive. And then finally, preserving infrastructure financing tools. There are a number of bills that we are working to share our concerns on. They are listed on the screen there, and they all have implications for system development charges, ranging from delaying collection of SDCs to the certificate of occupancy is one that we're seeing, as well as requiring changes to SDC methodologies and having the state be more involved in what those changes may look like. We are, again, seeing updates daily on this. Some of these bills were 998 was scheduled yesterday and got pulled off the agenda, as was 2260 was on an agenda for Thursday. And now we're hearing that that will be pulled into a work group conversation. So that's great. We are certainly willing to engage in conversations about how we can make that more workable without the mandate provision of how we finance infrastructure. And with that, I'm happy to answer your question.
Yeah, going back to the water infrastructure on Senate Bill 4, aren't you, I mean, everybody's kind of piling on to say, okay, state, we're going to need infrastructure money and your 200 million is a really nice offer, but it's not enough. So you guys see Clean Water Services just making sure they're in that conversation and you're part of the infrastructure conversation, not just water and electricity, but Clean Water Services as well. Is that what I understand there?
I think that that is accurate to say, especially as we start to talk about more specific site potentials. That again, what we want, we would love to be able to turn around infrastructure quickly, but we all know in reality, it takes time, it takes planning, and we're ready to do that work. But if we want to expedite any of that, it will require partnership from the state. And frequently when we talk about infrastructure, I get excited and then I realize people are talking about roads and electricity and the things that they can see more easily. So just reminding them again that the water piece of that, and we do see a lot of talk about the water supply piece of that. We're reminding them that with that water supply, someone has to take that water away and clean that. So we are making sure
One's
that
going in, one's coming out.
Exactly.
it does work that way. It's pretty simple but also not. So we are reminding them of that just to make sure those conversations evolve, that we are not forgotten in the context of what that could look like.
And I think the other piece of that, just to add on, is it's not just what's on the site that has to be built, but it's all the capacity that serves the site. And that's another piece where we, as both the county and Clean Water Services, remind everyone that it can't just be on-site preparedness. It's got to be system preparedness and community preparedness, regardless of where any development occurs.
It was just like anything else that everybody thinks that as long as they can flush the toilet and turn on the water and have fresh water, everyth's good, you know?
It's just magic.
So they don't understand the implications of how do we do that and sustain that. So it's a good idea.
Sewage magic or us. So what of the -3 version of Senate Bill 4? Or does that come later?
Well, we're gonna get into it, so
Okay.
let's get into it. I'm literally reading it as I was listening to Tracy talk, because I'm getting used to doing two things at once at this point in the session. So hot topic, I'll just skip down to semiconductor here.
I can wait.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, everything
Really
on this
okay.
slide will go very quickly because it's just updating you and we don't necessarily have a call to action quite yet. But keeping you informed on broadband, we are still having that conversation of how the state is going to make itself ready for the federal dollars. We are joining a coalition of folks who are really focused on making sure that we can pull down as many federal dollars to meet not just unserved, but underserved communities and meet the equity goals that are required in the federal legislation and not leave a single federal cent off our table. We want to bring all of that down. Talking now with the legislators from Washington County that sit on the Small Business and Economic Development Committee to really kind of paint that picture of what it means to do things in a way that makes us competitive, and pushing House Bill 3201.
I have no interest in making any member of any state committee, state role, Oregon business, whatever, I can't remember the acronym right now, feel bad about broadband. Rather, let's get as many dollars here as we can.
Yeah.
Time for us to be greedy.
Yeah.
So
and
let's work together.
that conversation is continuing on Thursday. There'll be further hearings on all of the different ideas around how broadband state laws and rules should function.
Karen, just
Yep.
to follow up that, I don't think we're all on the same page on that though, as with the state broadband office and business Oregon. I just get a sense that their focus and direction is different than what I'm hearing from, at least in Colpac. So
What, they don't understand that there are federal dollars that are gonna go elsewhere if we don't get our act together?
obviously we
Together?
haven't performed very well so far on that. So, so yeah, I think just making sure we're all going the same direction, I think is important.
I think that the conversation that Business Oregon has been allowed to have in the legislative process is really about the expansion of their broadband office and its broader mission. And they are working towards next steps as opposed to working on what they haven't done well. I know that Matt Craigie has been working with the broadband office to help the state challenge the maps. We are working with other folks to make sure that all that data is there at the federal level, and the state has been part of that process. We just need to make sure that they have the flexibility to do what needs to be done. So we're working on it.
Okay.
And I think it meets both goals of let's go forward
Yeah,
and make sure that the state is working with us. And I think that they want to.
yeah.
So that's what we've seen. On forestry issues, what I have been hearing is that most of those bills aren't going anywhere, but right now there is a potential focus on finding some state resources to backfill potentially both the Oregon Department of Forestry's budget and any county budgets. This is a very early nascent conversation. I don't have much more of an update, but other than with the new expected dollars that would come out of any state forest management implementation process, there is a noted gap and they need to fill it, and they're trying to figure out where the resources can be found to fill it. So that's as far as I can get into those, but all of those Senate bills that had been out are unlikely to be moving anytime this session. So it'll really be a budget conversation. On housing, that 60-day package is going out the Ways and Means door this week is our expectation. We have put in a letter of support related to the money coming out that relates to the emergency orders. So that way we can get the funding that you all were discussing this morning to come down from the state to the county in whatever ways that we can take advantage of it. I think staff has been very engaged, and I am making sure that I understand what it is that we're doing to be a part of that team. From there, the House is not done on housing, or the Senate, the legislature is not done on housing. No one's done on housing. We're never done on housing. But this is where the difficult conversations come. This is all of the bills that do not have consensus, that do not necessarily have all stakeholders rowing in the same direction on them. We've seen, as Tracy mentioned, the conversations around system development charges, but there's also conversations on timing of permitting, land use applications, what is our responsibility to do faster. I always say with what funding and with what resources, because we can't move faster if people don't exist. That's just not a viable outcome. But also making sure that we do not have to do this every 2 years where we redo our community development plans and then the legislature changes all the rules again and we have to redo it because that it really prevents us from building housing and being an effective partner. So we're going to be watching a lot of bills, hopefully not move forward this session in the housing space, that conversation is really going to heat right back up again. So on to semiconductors. There is a -3 to the Senate Bill 4, and I haven't gone through it completely yet to see what changes they've made, but it changes both pieces, both the investment pool and the land use section. I will say that the testimony in the committee has really focused on what should the land use solution be in all of this. We have not engaged in that section. What we have said is if you are going to make changes related to land use, it's got to be done in a way that considers capacity and community building. There's been a lot of conversation that, land use for industrial land also needs to be supported by the community services like housing. Childcare came up. Yes, it was yesterday. Capacity for our infrastructure to make sure that we are building communities and systems that work. But right now there is an ongoing debate as to superseding by the legislature or giving that authority over to the governor's office. And that conversation has not been resolved yet. And in scrolling through the -3s really quickly, it remains in the governor's hands to do some super speedy land use, as
So
what I would call
basically,
it.
Legislature's kicking it to the governor rather than them making that decision.
That is the process that they seem to be putting in place in Senate Bill 4 is to have a process that the governor runs to look statewide as opposed to any individual site being proffered by the legislature. The comments from the committee yesterday said that might not be the only amendment that's offered, but they're trying to figure out what they have the political ability to pass to move forward. I would also say that it is not the end of the semiconductor conversation because they recognize they haven't done the incentives piece yet either. And that's the piece where we are a huge part of that conversation. So
Senate Bill 4, the original Senate Bill 4 makes it the governor's decision.
correct.
The way -3 was published, it's like, seriously, delete lines.
It's a gut and stuff amendment, so
It
it
is.
deletes, that's what it is. It's, those deletes say delete the entire bill and replace it with the following bolded language, which is all really new, which is always makes it fun to read. But it puts more limits and restrictions around how that initial $210 million would be made available. That's what the first sections are related to, sections 1 through 9, and then sections 10 and 11 focus on the land use, again, focusing on a governor provided process. I'm not going to call it superseding, there's still process involved. And I haven't gone to see what all the other things
some
are
of the
below that.
language looks the same. So
Yeah.
I'll have to use a fine tooth comb.
When they are making a lot of intricate changes that change all the section numbers and stuff, they'll just gut and stuff the bill and so replace it all. That I've heard the committee's goal is to pass it tomorrow, but they've also had conversations about whether or not they're ready for that and it might be moved to next week. So all of that is moving somewhat quickly still.
Okay, thank you.
The final piece on hot topics is transportation. It has not come up in my updates to you so far because they've kind of put everything on pause while the housing and semiconductor packages get their financing in order. Because I don't know if you've heard, but we have to replace the bridge and it's very expensive. And they are trying to figure out how to do that financing and whether or not it's going to call for new revenues, which require a 3/5 vote. which is incredibly complicated in this session, versus taking money from various other places within ODOT's budget already, which then puts our financing for our projects that we would normally tap into those fundings at risk. So this is really a fine dance that they haven't answered how they want to answer yet. And so that's the next big thing. And they've, kind of put a pause on that until they get through a little bit more of the budget conversation. So that is the next big argument over funding that is coming forward. And I will say that in partnership with other counties, Association of Oregon Counties, LOC, and cities, we need to protect those dollars that we use, that we partner with the state on, and we can't lose those funds if we want to have a comprehensive and functional multimodal regional land use system. There is always conversation around tolling as well. We have heard that there is a low likelihood of them really wanting to open up any of that conversation, because there has to be a way to pay for 205, which they've started, and making sure that Clackamas County and those users of 205 are not the only ones that are asking to pay for the regional system. But that also then has implications for us as a local body that has diversion complications and other needs, and a few projects like, I don't know, the Southwest Corridor that need funding. So all of that is about to heat up, and it's super fun, and I love every minute of it.
So the opposition to the bridge, is that just the price tag, or is it they don't like the design, or are they still haggling over basically everything? What?
I think the last point is probably correct. I think the price tag is very intimidating. I think there is still ongoing conversation on what the size and scope of the bridge should be. All of that is part of the process, and they are very still in the early design phase. So they haven't completely solved all those answers, thus creating natural opposition. I think if we fail to fund the bridge in this session, Washington County, or the state of Washington, is going to be asking some pretty significant questions about partnership, which would be a nice turn of events from 5 years ago.
Do you know if Governor Kotek has met with the governor of Washington at all?
I do not know that. With that, I will turn it back to Zucker to talk about just a few other little things.
So unlike Aaron, I actually do have a call to action. We would like to sign on to a letter in opposition to, or we have a recommendation to sign on to a letter against Senate Bill 858. Let me tell you about what that bill does. That creates children's service districts. So specifically, the bill authorizes the creation of children's districts and provides them with the authority to levy permanent property taxes. This would lead to there's a couple of different points that I want to make in regards to this. Number one, more taxing districts could lead to compression and a loss of revenue for the county. Second, the Student Success Act already provides for children's services, which is what the bill's intending to solve for. And third, services authorized underneath Senate Bill 858 can be provided already by school districts, cities, counties, and special districts. And just as an additional note for the first point that I made, in 2019 to 2020, counties lost 1.6% in taxes due to compression. So this will definitely hurt our ability to generate revenue for the county, which is why we wanted to get the board's permission and support to sign on to a letter that opposes Senate Bill 858. I will say other entities that have already signed on to this letter include the Association of Counties, the League of Oregon Cities, our partners at Beaverton and Hillsborough, the Special Districts Association of Oregon, and just to name a couple others, there's the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, as well as the Oregon Library Association.
So is the board comfortable with our decision to join that stakeholder group and submit testimony? We know that it has been a conversation that's taken place here in Washington County.
This is the bill that was a favor to Chuck Riley.
This bill is one that has perennially come up when Senator Riley was still a senator. It was his bill. Again, I believe he has been working on getting it passed again now as a citizen, as opposed to as a legislator.
And Commissioner Willie, just to supplement Aaron's answer, I think at the top of this bill it says it's on behalf of or requested by Senator Riley.
I'm okay with proposing.
As well.
I'm comfortable with AOC opposing it. I just looked at the testimony from the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, and I can identify with the statements that they've made in their testimony. And I assume that the League of Oregon Cities will probably oppose this as well. So
I heard that they already had, is that,
There
I
is a,
just can't see
they
it.
haven't submitted that one pager yet. They're trying to get any last minutes, which is why we're bringing it to you today. It'd be the last, basically the last day to put our logo on that one pager, if that is the wish of this board, but we wanted to come to you before making that choice.
Well, you know, I think we're already looking at the harsh reality of having to move forward with property tax increases for public safety levy, for library services, for building a new courthouse and having a bond program for that. So, and
death by 1,000 cuts as well.
well, and we know that in the whole state, every county has been studied. It was a 2018 or 2019 study that showed we're a childcare desert across our state. So this will continue to exacerbate a patchwork. And that's why I just don't think we can support that. So, yes, I am comfortable with opposing it, as painful as it is, right? For me to do so.
Mhm.
But this is the way our tax structure has set us up. You know, we're all living with the burden of our two-legged stool.
This is sad commentary. I mean, there's just no question about it. And I feel badly. We know what our needs are, and we can't get the resources, appropriate resources to address the needs. And I'm sorry to vote for along with my colleagues here, because we do know what we need in relationship to childcare, to pre-K, to the whole gamut. But this is not an approach that's going to work. It's one more time that it's not an approach that can work. So I'm in agreement.
I think you have your, what you need to move forward.
Yeah, we know this is not an easy conversation in Washington County. We know that there's a lot of complicating factors. That's why we wanted to bring it to your attention as opposed to acting independently based on our work. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you.
We know this is a really tough question.
Zucker, do you want to continue?
Yeah, and I just want to honor the remarks of all of the commissioners, and we certainly honor that in our own legislation. We included childcare workforce as part of House Bill 2652, because we deeply understand that as well, and I think that reverberates within the entire institution. Just in furtherance of the slide, in the health and human services sector, there's still a lot to be decided. They've held a couple of work sessions already in the House Healthcare Committee, but not a lot of stuff has moved yet. We continue to participate as part of the Measure 110 work group every Thursday morning, and we're still, kind of going through the process of understanding what needs to be integrated per the Secretary of State's recommendations for implementation on Measure 110 programming. So I'm continuing to work in that field on behalf of Washington County. And outside of that, a lot of stuff is still just up in the air in terms of what's going to be proceeding forward. So I'll be paying attention to that and keeping the board up to date. That's it for me.
Before you move on, from HHS. Thank you, Aaron, for bringing to my attention a couple of bills. I did check in with Chairs Smith and Vega Peterson. Though I have not been able to catch up through your bill tracker. So we did discuss Senate Bill 953, and I just wanted to share it for the full board's attention. This is a bill that would change the medical examiner function from a state-based function to a county-based function without funding. So Aaron already has the guidance from us to oppose unfunded mandates. So that would be one.
And actually it's Zucker who will be taking that on.
Okay,
And I'm
great.
happy to comment on that topic as well, Chair and Commissioner.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I had a good conversation this afternoon with the governor's team that's actually working forward to pushing this bill forwards. Essentially, they're trying to deal with a workforce shortage. There's not enough forensic pathologists in the state, and to compete against other states nationally is incredibly difficult. We rank 49th in pay. So what I said to them was, we have some skin in the game. We will include you in our House Bill 2652 as one of the fields or professions that can benefit from that workforce bill. You'll get the pay equity exemption. And then in the meantime, while DAS figures out a better classification system, because that's one of the problems, is that DAS has not updated the classification system for forensic pathologists. We will be a partner with you, in trying to cure the low salaries that forensic pathologists get at the state level. But what we will not do, or what we will not stand for, is having an unfunded mandate placed upon our county, because then the same environment that the state of Oregon will have to compete with on a national level is the exact thing that we're going to have to go compete with. We don't have an infrastructure that's built to going out and recruiting these things. And if there's an environment or situation where House Bill 2652 doesn't get approved, then we'll be working, we'll have even more challenges to recruit the type of professions that we need to get. It's going to be very, very costly to implement what they want us to do. So I told the governor's team, take it back to your team, this proposal about being included within House Bill 2652. We're happy to be a partner to you in terms of if you need budget notes so that you get supplemental funding, from the legislature to fulfill these roles, but don't dump this responsibility onto us.
We just won't do it.
Yeah.
Let him
exactly.
take us to court.
Yeah, so I made that clear to the governor's team. So they said that they would discuss that internally and then get back to me. I tried to really pitch them on the vision that if we can succeed on House Bill 2652, one of the people was telling me that they go to their annual conference and Oregon has a negative reputation because we don't pay enough. I said, if you can help me pass 2652, you will shake that reputation because you'll have a whole set of incentives that you can offer to candidates, and you'll easily be able to publicize those incentives. So let's be partners. Don't just force things upon us.
So on 2652, you may want to touch bases with Chair Smith's office with regard to a problem that she just highlighted yesterday from Vahid of their housing and homeless team, where for letting the contracts for SHS services, their community-based partners are reporting that they can't offer up to the regional wage due to pay equity problems. So if you could track that down, that would be great. We also discussed House Bill 3152 only from a syncing up standpoint. So I don't know that you need us to weigh in on that.
No, I think that continues to be outside of the scope of work that we need to take on as a county.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for those follow-ups. At this, Tracy did have to step out to meet with a legislator, so that's why she quietly left the room. Are there any?
Just tired of listening.
No, she was not.
Okay.
We will continue to coordinate with Clean Water Services and work with Tracy and Mark and Diane to make sure that everyone is represented as we move forward. So
Sorry,
there-
one other thing.
Please.
Well, it was just the topic that the comment that I shared with you this morning before our meeting started. Zucker, recognizing that you're tracking the Health and Human Services portfolio. I was commenting to Aaron this morning that I heard a piece on OPB radio that talked about the state legislature taking action to make Narcan more readily available. And my antenna are so peaked on unfunded mandates that I want to make sure this just isn't enabling community members to get it more easily through county public health and therefore unfunded mandate. Yeah, for the opioid overdose. So I'm really on the lookout
Yep.
for any possibility of unfunded mandate and pushing back. So.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any other questions about any other issues? Good, because we are over time.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
But the good
Both of you.
Yeah, so just a quick reminder of where we are now. There is that fancy red box on the 17th. I can almost read that. My eye doctor will be proud. For the first session posting deadline, and then that first week of April is the first session work session deadline. Those are where we'll see what rubber is hitting the road as far as policy packages that will move forward and move down either to Ways and Means or over to the other chamber. So we look forward to knowing a smaller realm of that 2,800 bills, 28,000. Oh, good Lord. So with that, both on behalf of Washington County and Clean Water Services GR teams, thank you for your time, questions, and happy to work with you on anything else that comes up before we're before you next time. Thank you.
No, I always thank you for being responsive when I need a quick answer, and you're always there. So thank you for that.
Thank you all.
keep up the great work.
And thanks to Tracy too.
Yes. Yes, Team Washington County and Clean Water Services. Couldn't ask for better. All right, so we'll move on to climate planning update. And we have a team of presenters. So Ms. Angie, I'll leave it to you to introduce the team today.
Okay, thank you. And I will start while they get settled. So this is a follow-up discussion as that we determine what our next steps are in climate work. And I do want to ground the board that Washington County has had a significant investment in climate action steps over the last several years. In 2022, Robin and her team had collected a summary from our departments as far as what are we doing in the space of climate action, moving forward both state mandated requirements and also our local priorities too. With that, I want to also just take a moment to recognize Robin's years of service here at Washington County, as she will be, I'll call it, moving across the street, but yet more importantly, using the foundation that she has built here in Washington County to further the work in Hillsborough. And this is part of our local government ecosystem that we need to congratulate those that are continuing to move and grow in their career. I'm always happy when they stay in the local government space because we're kind of sharing through the network. So I do personally wish Robin the best and also know that we have a great partner in Hillsborough. So it is just across the street after all. And with that, I will turn this presentation over to the team. This was a follow-up based on your board's direction. A couple pieces that I want to highlight in that direction is number one, you had asked the question, how can we do this work within our existing resources? What are the opportunities that we can pull on based on our current budget reality that we face and the continued commitment to climate work here at Washington County? So that was really the foundational that brought us here. In addition, we needed more time to understand the context of the public health modernization funds that we are receiving directly from the state and how they connect directly to the conversations that your board has had based on the options that our sustainability team has brought forward in the past. So those were really the large kind of areas that we were looking at, in addition to also looking at what are adaptation options that we can look at. So not just mitigation, but also adaptation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Miss Angie. Good to see you again this afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Robin Strawn. I'm the county's sustainability manager. I use she, her pronouns, and I am here to support my colleague Carolina. I'm going to pass the mic over to her. She's going to lead our part of the presentation today.
Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. I'm Carolina Martins. I use she, her pronouns. And as Robin said, I work with sustainability. I'm the sustainability specialist, and I'll be co-presenting with the Public Health Division. And we'll provide you an update on the climate planning. And this is our agenda for today. We're going to start with an overview of the local public health modernization plans. And after that, we are going to share the climate planning timeline to date and highlight some milestones to help us understand how we got here and some related events to our climate conversation. Next, I'm going to talk about climate and equity. And then we will present the revised climate plan within existing fund resources, which was a request of your board. We'll close the presentation with climate planning timeline moving forward, and we'll have time for questions. The purpose of this meeting is to follow up from the November 29 board work session on a community-involved climate adaptation plan option with current county resources. We want to provide you an overview of the public health modernization governmental framework and the required plans, including a climate adaptation plan. And we want to inform you about the climate adaptation plan led by Washington County Public Health in collaboration with the Office of Sustainability, aligned with the One Washington County approach. And I'm going to pass to Marie, and she's going to talk about the local public health modernization plans.
Thank you, Carolina. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Marie Bowman Davis. I'm the Public Health Division Manager and the local Public Health Administrator, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So the slide we have here today is a visual representation of the required local public health modernization plans. As seen in the middle, the plans will include climate adaptation, all hazards, and health equity action. The boxes to the left and right identify internal and external engagement that will occur during the development of these plans. Each of these plans will be developed with a strong foundation of existing work and partnerships. For example, the All Hazards Plan is being updated with emergency management as our primary partner. The Health Equity Action Plan will focus on how we address inequities and build on partnerships with the Health and Human Services Health Equity Work Group and the leadership of the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. Staffing and contracts,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Ms. Bowman, if I can interrupt. Board, I just want to ground you with Mr. Wheeler's recent presentation on emergency management. So this truly is a One Washington County approach. As Ms. Bowman indicated, if you see on the funnel, you see climate adaptation, all hazards. So want to just ground you, that is the required all hazards plan. And then also have health equity action. So in the previous slide, we talked about a One Washington County approach between public health and also the Office of Sustainability. And this work goes further than that.
Thank you, Ms. Angie. So the staffing and contracts to support this work is currently funded with revenue from the state. As Ms. Angie indicated in the opening, it's through our state public health modernization funds. As described in, at the top of the slide, you'll see a due on or before 12/31/2025 and a House bill and a link there. So as described in that House bill, the Oregon legislature set a deadline for plan submission to be no later than 2025. So that's the time horizon in which we're working. As Ms. Angie indicated, the focus of today's conversation are the options for climate planning and the partnership with Office of Sustainability. So what we have here is a timeline that Carolina mentioned earlier, what we have been doing to date. So at the top of this timeline, it includes the sustainability milestones in yellow. These were shared with the board at previous work sessions. The bottom of the timeline includes public health milestones in blue. And to the right of the timeline includes sustainability and public health collaborations in green. So the blue timeline includes public health staff efforts with regional public health partners to identify health impacts of climate change since 2019. This includes a regional and climate and health monitoring report that was established in 2019, and an updated report was published in 2021. It also highlights February of 2022 as the start of our approved strategies to develop a climate and health adaptation plan with community partners. And then the green line timeline, again, highlights the collaborative work with sustainability and public health since that November 29th board work session. So we have been moving along and have had some milestones since then that I'd like to share. So we have been meeting regularly to discuss how we can work together to develop a climate adaptation plan that blends the needs of public health and aligns with the One Washington County approach. This past February, the collaboration resulted in the development of a greenhouse gas inventory and community engagement scope of work. These plans are out for RFP as we speak and are funded by Public Health Modernization. The additional plans for collaborative work will be shared later in the presentation, and so I will now turn it back over to Carolina.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
before we move on? Could you repeat which plans are already out for RFP?
The February 2023 greenhouse gas inventory and community engagement request for proposals.
So my question is related to that. So this is my second form of being an elected official, and the state legislature has adopted different climate GHG goals as far back as 2005. So if the state is, as part of the public health modernization, expecting every county public health to go through this, why hasn't the state done a standard GHG per county so that there's consistency versus having different flavors? I mean, Metro's already done this for our region. I just don't get why it seems like we're spending the same dollars over and over again.
So I would like to clarify that the greenhouse gas inventory was not a requirement of the state. It was an option that we chose to invest our dollars from public health modernization. I would be happy to turn it over to Robin.
Well, wait a sec. So we're part of, our public health works as part of a regional public health system, a 5 region with Columbia County, Multnomah, Clackamas. What I don't want to end up happening is that amongst at least our tri-county public health team, that we end up with 3 different methods, double dipping, gaps and all that. It just been there, done that on GHG inventories. That's why I've taken a very pragmatic approach. So, you know, I'm not calling into question the need for an RFP. I'm calling into question, how do we make sure that, you know, we've had fighting in this country for years over basic science. I don't doubt the science. I'm trying to get down to practical stuff that people relate to. So Any thoughts? Is there some coordination we should do, can do?
So Chair Harrington, in response to that, I think you bring up a really good point. And a benefit that we do have is the strong partnership and collaboration amongst the Tri-County for public health. So we can take that back
Great.
to staff and have that inquiry to see how we can align those efforts and how we can that opportunity could then transcend to what are region-wide opportunities to align actions and outcomes as well.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Can I just ask the question of, so the local public health modernization plan is being funded by the local public health? Is that what I heard you say?
It is, we are receiving funds here in Washington County through a program element from the Oregon Health Authority. Those funds come from our state general fund
Okay, and they're sufficient.
to do the work that we have been doing and that we are presenting today. Yes.
Okay. The rest of the state might take a lead on
And
that.
hopefully they won't be cut.
Yeah, there's that.
That's what we get to worry about.
The conversations that I have had with staff, we are not expecting that these dollars be cut. So we actually had that conversation.
Thank you.
Before we move forward, I would just like to make a note that we have an upcoming meeting with Clackamas County and Monmouth County to partner with them. And the greenhouse gas inventory will be very important to set up us for this partnership to apply for external grants, federal grants. So that's why we're also collaborating with public health to do the greenhouse gas inventory. And the vendor who is working with us has worked with the other counties as well. So now I'd like to take a moment to talk about climate and equity. We cannot talk about climate change and not talk about climate justice. I will go over this diagram, which is a representation of how different strategies can be utilized to fight climate change and achieve more equitable outcomes in our community. We know that greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, they are the root cause of climate change. And mitigation and adaptation, which you can see at the bottom of this diagram, are different approaches to address climate change. And because we are already committed to some level of climate change, we need both. We are already experiencing events such as snowstorms, the heat waves, and wildfires. So we are already dealing with the impacts of climate change. And as you can see on the left side at the bottom, mitigation reduces the emissions and is the only way to address the root cause of climate change. This will lessen the intensity of the impacts of climate change. And as I just mentioned before, mitigation strategies can help the organization align the goals with federal and state goals and is the best practice in the industry. Many of our partners are already taking this approach, and it provides opportunities for regional coordination, such as the one that I mentioned previously. And as you may have seen, we've received letters from our partners and members of our communities concerned about the coordination with other jurisdictions and how the county is addressing emissions. Adaptation, which is the plan requested by your board, involves changes in the current processes to help us live with the problem. If we only focus on adaptation, the impacts of climate change will get worse. And as a result, the adaptation strategies will become insufficient because we need to keep investing to keep it up with the changes in the climate over time. And as you can see on the left, the yellow arrow shows that the further we go up towards the root cause of climate change, which are the greenhouse gas emissions, the closer we can get to achieve equity in our community. And underserved communities, they are contributing the least to GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, but they are the ones who bear the greatest burden and who are already suffering with the impacts of climate change. Cutting emissions, as you can see, the arrow, the blue arrow going up, reduces the harmful impacts of climate change and is fundamental to ensure equity in our community. So both approaches are important.
So if I could chime in here, for the purposes of securing your consultants for these RFPs, 3 of us have been around this block already with climate smart community work that we lived through as a county commissioner, as a metro councilor, as a mayor. We've done this work and invested a lot with the equitable development program for Southwest Corridor. So if your responses to the RFP, if they want to be viewed as credible by at least this one member of 5, whoever you secure had better do a deep dive, not only into what the adopted plan is, but the study guides that went into it.
Thank you, Chair Hurton.
And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change emphasized the need of both approaches, adaptation and mitigation. And in their 2022 report, they said that successful adaptation requires urgent, more ambitious and accelerated action. And at the same time, rapid and deep cuts in greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm gonna pass it over to Marie again.
Okay, so this revised climate plan option slide, the 3 gray boxes are the options that were presented to this board at previous work sessions that required new resources. So the green boxes are the new plans resulting from this collaboration we've been describing between the Office of Sustainability and the Public Health Division. So both of the green plans engage community. They take a one Washington County approach and they meet our local public health modernization requirements with existing resources. The lighter green is what we can accomplish, again, with our existing budgets and staff with continued collaboration. The darker green, the Climate Adaptation Plus, is an enhanced version of the light green and would require our sustainability partners to shift their work priorities, to lead countywide internal engagement across departments and collaborate with our cities, utilities, and other jurisdictional partners. As Carolina mentioned in the previous slides, the most successful and equitable climate work combines mitigation and adaptation strategies. With this in mind, the Adaptation Plus plan will allow us to leverage our existing staff time to prepare for future mitigation work and position us to apply for external funding opportunities such as federal and state grants. And as Carolina mentioned, we already have our first meeting scheduled to discuss such an opportunity.
If I might, Ms. Angie, I don't understand why we're not shifting all of the priorities from the Office of Sustainability over to HHS, because we've already shown that we've done some heavy lifting in the land use and transportation side of things since what, 2015? Jerry, when did you start as mayor?
2009.
So that's why I think this health modernization plan approach, I think we stand a much greater chance of success than what has been positioned since 2005 in the state. So.
I think one of, Chair, in response to that, I just want to applaud the team for their creativity and really openness as we've been working through this. And what it has brought up is just the how do we best align ourselves or organize the work internally? So those conversations are ongoing. And how do we continue to really live out the One Washington County vision? Because I earlier had referenced emergency management. So we are actively having those conversations and more to come as the team continues to dive into this work.
I'm not sure I followed the question the chair just asked around shifting it to HHS.
Could look at an org
How did
chart.
you, how could you, I'm not asking where it falls in the the org chart. I'm just trying to understand some boxing in going on here. So
I don't know what box, I'm
So,
not
I
following.
think a development was mentioned, HHS was mentioned, and then you made a comment. So I'm just not following everything that was just said. So
We are currently determining how we best organize our work based on the board's direction as we move forward and aligning with our current available resources here at Washington County. That is it. How we team, how we collaborate together, and how we get the work done in service to the community. We have to continue to be flexible and nimble internally. And that means sometimes we have to stop doing certain things so we can start doing something else based on evolving community need. And that may mean how we work as a team may be different than a week before to how we're working moving forward. And that's just the continued kind of culture that we're building here at Washington County, not just reflective of this conversation, but any conversation in general too. Is that helpful?
yeah, that's
Okay.
very understandable. I just, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is our climate planning timeline moving forward. So this is the collaborative approach starting spring of this year through winter of 2025. On this timeline, I'd like to bring to your attention the community engagement milestones. We'll be working with a consultant over approximately an 18-month period on a multi-phase community engagement process. With the consultant, we will identify established county committees, councils, and boards such as ACRE and the Public Health Advisory Council that can potentially work with us as collaborators in developing the climate adaptation plan. We also plan to collaborate with community-based organizations that work with and represent highly impacted and marginalized communities. So phase one of our engagement efforts should be complete by December of 2023. This will help us identify the climate adaptation needs of our community. Phase two will be completed by July of 2024 and will involve working with our community and our partners to prioritize adaptation needs. Phase three will be complete by December of 2024 and includes working with our community on adaptation strategies informed by these needs, the community's needs and priorities. And finally, phase four, complete by July 2025, we will be working with community on the climate adaptation plan. Efforts across this timeline will result in county climate change adaptation plan by the end of 2025 that leads with race, centers equity, diversity, and inclusion, and is responsive to the House bill deadline. So thank you for your time today. We look forward to receiving additional feedback and questions.
Commissioners, what are your questions and comments?
Happy to start it off by some comments. Didn't even have to do it this time. Brought it over.
Good job.
I'm a slow learner, but it happens.
Old dogs new tricks.
Yeah, old dogs, new tricks. Well, thank you for the work. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of passion around the subject. I think we're all trying to understand the implications of whatever route we go. It's important work. We understand that. I don't think anyone has not recognized that. I think as we dialogue, I think this is for the listening public or anyone else, I think it's a little premature to suggest that anyone who takes a position or is asking questions is doing some devil's work or something by asking those questions, or is not really understanding the issue. I heard the speaker earlier today come on, and it happened to be directed at our chair, but those kinds of comments I think are unfortunate, because there's a lot of issues in the whole climate question. I'm kind of rambling, but here's my thoughts. One, I always look at this and say it's kind of we're looking at the same cause all the time: greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases. No one disputes that that's an important issue, but there's more than just that issue. I mean, it has to do with, natural occurrences that happen over millions of years. We'd still have dinosaurs if there weren't an ice age. We wouldn't have other kinds of climatic conditions if there weren't changes. And so some adaptation is necessary. And I think that's what you said. But we need to understand that. And I think this is a process that we'll all go through together. So I hope it's not just as simplistic as saying, gee, if we cut the greenhouse gases in Washington County, Oregon, then the whole world's going to change. Frankly, with the Chinese building more coal-fired plants every day, and we're in the same world, I don't know how to quite get out of that. That's, I mean, it's kind of like doing something and thinking we're going to cure the evils of the ocean. It's not going to happen quite that way. We need to figure out how we deal more comprehensively in a system. So I think that's the adaptation part. I'm also concerned that we understand what this is a cost. I mean, we can do a lot of things, and I certainly don't want to leave to my great grandchildren a world that's worse than I find it today. But I don't know what that cost is going to be. I mean, we've got to be aware that the only way the country propped itself up during the recession is to infuse large capital amounts. There's not that kind of money anymore. What's going to happen if we prop up, or we propose things that people aren't able to pay for? You think you have a population disparities in income and wealth now, you're really going to have it. So I think we need to look at that. And so my rambling says this is not an easy question. If it was easy, we all would have done it. Chair mentioned that some of us have been through this before. We have, but not as comprehensively as you have done it, not as maybe well thought out as you're going to do it, but we attempted. And so we're not insincere in the work. We're just trying to understand. But so what were my main key takeaways? Please don't always just say it's greenhouse, 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 greenhouse. Not when we say, well, we'll go to the electric vehicles because that's the cure for everything. And we know it costs 7 times as much energy to create a electric vehicle as it does a gas-fired one. We know that we're going to sit there and not have the infrastructure to do it. And what's that going to cost us? We understand that we've got partners throughout the world who are doing things that we need to have some kind of a climate action plan worldwide. We're all going to be, I mean, we're all in this together. So we need to understand that. We understand we need to have something the public can afford. And we need to sit there and be thoughtful, I think, with one another, and no matter how crazy our comments might be, because we're trying to understand all this too, that people won't draw conclusions about all this too soon or pick on any one individual. I was a little sensitive about comments this morning, so I apologize to whoever the speaker was, but I just think that's a little premature in making comments before we go through it. But I appreciate what you did. I appreciate what we're going to hear, and I hope that your proposal, your RFP and consultants are thoughtful enough to look more comprehensively than just say one trick will fix it all. The world will be better. I would have fixed it 20 years ago if that was the case. Yeah. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other commissioners?
Did you have any comments? I'm absorbing a lot of comments. I'm absorbing a lot of information here. And I really hadn't thought about a structural type of situation here. So as the chair mentioned.
Oh, I just asked the simple question, which related to why not reorg the resources into HHS, right? Given this public health approach, we've already got, really knowledgeable environmental health folks and whatnot. So that's what that
And I
comment was getting at. That's all.
And I hadn't really thought about that. So that's what I'm saying. The one piece that I've said before that I will continue to say is I really am interested in the community engagement and making sure, and I do see that as a part of this moving forward. I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of how, you okay? Barely.
I'm getting, it's not what you're saying.
Thank you. So glad to hear that. So
It gets really sensitive about that, so I just want to make sure.
So I just want to be on record saying that is extremely important to me. I think we hear it, everywhere we go. So as we move forward, that voice is important to have at the table. So
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. I'll give a break to Commissioner Willie. Thank you for your great presentation. First of all, Robin, good luck to you, City of Hillsborough. And look forward to somehow crossing paths. Hopefully you'll be doing climate and you'll somehow be on this journey with the county as well. So I'm glad you're not leaving Washington County. So you're somewhere in Washington County. Great presentation, and thank you to you both. And I heard your message, mitigation and adaptation are interlinked, and I think there's no debate. We've heard from the community that we can't move away, and it doesn't sound like that's what I'm very confused of the direction we're taking. From a public health professional, I have concerns about what we're not going to be doing, focusing on this part, but I trust your leadership, Marie, and your judgment, and as our local health public authority official. I trust your judgment in coming to the board to give us information for us to make that sound decision. With that, I am a bit concerned about the direction we're going, and in terms of, I don't know, the framing, the titling was climate adaptation. And I think we're sending a message to our community that we're moving away from climate mitigations. So I think we need to be a bit more, that's not what I.
We never were doing climate mitigation. We've had no actions.
I hear you. I'm gonna finish my comment and say that the community, we need to be strong in how we message, because I don't think, considering what the chair said, that's not the understanding that is within our community. We have been doing climate mitigations. We have been helping our community address, greenhouse gas emissions, and we have been doing, some kind of climate change mitigations. But now this conversation around adaptation, people are asking the question, how are you going to adapt to a dying environment? What are you going to do? Are you going to move every resident of Washington County to a new area? And where is that new area, right? So I think those are the questions and the comments that I hear from the community. And if we don't listen to our community, then are we not their leaders, right? So we have to listen to our community. So we have to come back with a strong, message around, and I'm really hoping the inventory and this timeline, that aggressive timeline that you laid out, and very detailed, I think when you come back I think it will be really critical of that decision of where do we go? How do we help? Yes, we need to mitigate, continue, and yes, we need to do adaptation to really help the community adapt to this environment. But we can't just say, we're never going to mitigate, so, and if we have not been doing mitigations, then more the reason to do it now, right? To drop everything to say, forget about adaptations. We need to mitigate now. So to your point, Chair Harrington, if we've never been mitigating climate change, now is the time.
Okay, so Commissioner Rogers, you've been here for 38, 39 years? Has the county had a climate action plan?
Depends on how you
Has it
define it.
adopted a climate action plan?
Well, sort of. Well, sort of in pieces. Nothing like comprehensive.
Right.
Yeah, nothing comprehensive.
So to say we've been doing mitigation, we've had an Office of Sustainability focused on our operations.
Yes.
So we haven't been doing mitigation with community. So that's where I disagree with the picture you've painted.
So if I could just change directions. This information, I was just, I really am where Commissioner Teresa was. The more information we get, the smarter we are. And this is stuff that that I know very surface level. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing to do this and these studies that we've got coming over the next 18 months. And I think what bothered me most is that 18 months is 2025. And I always think 2025 is like way out there. So let's not bring that into 18 months here. But the studies that you're doing are going to continually educate us. And to me, we can say it's a big world issue and what's our little Washington County going to do about it? Or we can say, what small little bites can we take off this to make things better and maybe encourage others to take the same lead. So I'm certainly supportive and appreciate the work that you've done, especially you, Robin. I know that, are you taking Peter's spot over there? Peter was a great guy over there. He got some good things done. So high expectations on your part, but anyway, just again, I appreciate your educating me on this, and we'll see where we can go with this information. So thank you.
So my question starts to the board. Could you bring up the prior slide, please? So board, help me understand. Where does the board fit in there? And what do you need to be on this journey? Because if the expectation is that there is some plan adopted by this board, I don't see it. And I don't see a journey to get there. But I thought, colleagues, I would ask you, what do you see that I don't see yet?
I'll go. I think I don't see where the board makes a commitment to this problem. And I don't see where is the sort of the community phasing group that we talked about in some of the auction. Where did that come in? So one, the commitment is missing for me, but I was willing to go along this journey to see what comes out of this timelines to make that decision. But I think we don't actually even have a commitment to do this work as a board level. What is the board's commitment to this issue, and how do we establish? And then, so I think it goes back to that resolution that Commissioner Teresa and I brought forward to establish that commitment, but
so
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I think this has some ingredients. But I think that there needs to be some additional planning done here. Otherwise, all you have is a department plan, and you won't have a board that's going to put any financial commitment behind it or any policy commitment behind it, because they're not on the journey, right? So I think, and you did mention a couple of good things with regard to community engagement that was highlighted. Public Health Advisory Committee and ACRE. And I was just pointing out this morning that one piece of infrastructure, ACRE is our newest board and commission that was started. And it took about 5 meetings before packets were finally published and available. We were just catching up this morning on summary minutes. I appreciate hearing that those 2 committees that are already in place, you'll leverage. I think that's really good. But we've also heard, members of our community who propose that we just empower them, give them the quote unquote task, and leave it to them to come back and tell us what we need to do as a county government, which is not a reasonable approach as well, because we have limited resources. So I think this timeline has good ingredients, but I also think that I'd like to see a clear definition of what distinguishes phase 1 from phase 2 from phase 3. If you know that yet, or it could be like some programs that I've dealt with before, there's the universe of possibilities. And then, so phase, you have the GHG inventory, right? So a large pool of options. And so then your phases 1, 2, and 3, and 4 may be a narrowing, right? But I don't know that because I only have this information to go on. So that's why I have these questions, and I'm looking for a further iteration.
So Chair, we can follow up with that information, including what are the clear board touch points, further illustrate just the involvement of the Public Health Advisory. What does that mean and what scope?
Yeah.
ACRE, what does that mean and what scope? Defining engagement windows. So on this timeline, it refers to phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. Typically in community engagement, you can sometimes better define what phase 1 is. And then as you kind of narrow that funnel, it becomes clear as you go through the timeline. But we can take kind of more this into a further project plan. This is just a really high level presentation. So a high level timeline. So if there's other aspects that you're not seeing on here, we'd be happy to provide that in follow up.
Yep. So like I said, good ingredients. Then also related is we've had our first conversation about climate and what might we do in 2019. And based upon what was on our plate, we said, we just don't have the bandwidth to invest time into this topic because of what we already had on our plate in 2019. So we put it on our list of things to come back to, and then we went on one incredible wild ride with COVID, which led to our July 2021. I think it was July 2021, where we asked our 2 staffs to report on efforts, and then went through further conversation. And I want to compliment you, Commissioner Rogers. You're being very consistent. I've heard you make some of the same comments in each of these conversations.
Maybe that's all I know. I'm teasing you.
No, because one of the reasons why I was recommending we get started with more of the adaptation is because locally, people can really relate to that. What I mean by I mean the effects that we're already living with today. It's no longer out there in the future, right? The heat dome that we went through was that June of 2021?
Yes.
Thank you. The wacky extreme weather incident. Luckily, we haven't had the floods and the hurricanes and the tornadoes, but you can't travel. Air traffic travel is no longer a smooth ride all the time, right? You have to expect it's going to be bumpy or worse. So these are very real effects that I think we can use to galvanize more of our community members around this topic than ever before. You know, okay, so someone came and commented today, and people are going to want to hear what they want to hear. So, you know, they'll keep commenting, fine. But we do have limited resources of time, energy, dollars, and political capital. And we've got to be pragmatic. And I'm also going to be pragmatic about what the state expects us to do as well, because they didn't follow through on their 2005 goals, their legislative requirements that had all of us at the city, county, and metro level make commitments on land use and transportation. They've left us high and dry. And that's where I'm not interested in a community topic where we're going to be solving the world when we're living in the world of Measure 547 and 50, property tax constraints, so on and so forth. And we're looking at having to decrease our social services as presented today with developmental disability, with aging services, with veteran services, with mental health services, with substance abuse services. You keep going down the line. Public safety, patrol, jail, community corrections, juvenile justice. But darn, we'll have a great looking climate action plan. I just can't do it.
Yeah, so one of the areas that we are seeing the state following through on their funding commitments is the public health modernization. And Commissioner, if I want to come back to the question you had asked Ms. Bowman, if this work takes away the public health team from their current work, it does not, because we have new resources from the state to complete this work. So I want to kind of just uplift that. The public modernization funds, we have been seeing an increase in those funds and resources since
2019. What was our first
2015
2015 is when modernization was passed in the state. We've had 2 bienniums of funding, so 4 years before the 21.
So this is one area. So I just want to assure the board that we are seeing it follow through, and that is all indications that we are hearing from the state at this point, even with their budget deliberations.
Good. One of the results of the heat dome, OHCS, the director of OHCS at the time, and the director of OHA, a week later, had a learning session where we realized 211 was not open 24 hours, 7 days a week. And they've gotten temporary funding to implement to that level. But that was one of the learnings. And the other learning that I recall loud and clear is we can't expect our vulnerable community members to leave their homes as normal, whether it's for dialysis or for other shelter provisions. Hence, being more assertive about getting air conditioning into more people's apartments and other living arrangements. So we've got a lot of work to do so that people don't die with the effects we're living with today. So
Three big points, and that one is that, thank you for your passion. It's important. And secondly, and I'm looking at him right now, Dale Feek, this reminds me a lot of what to the left, Diane and others faced in regards to the 12, and when we had phosphorus issues, we didn't think we could solve them, but we developed the science. So that's what we're going to do, and I appreciate that. So keep up the fight. We don't always like to hear what's being said, but I think it's important that we have people who come and do the hard work every week or month telling us about that. So it's important. And my last comment is to you, Robin. I can remember you walking in the door, and the board was very supportive at that time. Still are, but they were very supportive of all that you were doing. We didn't really know how it would work. We didn't really know what we were going to get, but we were committed to that action. I know, and I'm only saying this because the last time I'm probably going to see you and get to say something. We appreciated the work. I think the board still appreciates the work. You are a loss to Washington County government. I mean, you're going to go, that's great. But you've done a lot of really good work. It's easier to follow somebody else's efforts to build on them than to develop. You developed from scratch and you did a terrific job. So I'm complimenting you. I think that you really did a good job. I'll miss you, and I wish you all the best over in Hillsborough.
If I have the permission, can I follow up with the comment from Commissioner Fye? So Washington County has not done mitigation for the community. The work that we have been doing is internally focused. However, the Environmental Protection Agency and other international agencies, they acknowledge the importance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that's why there are non-competitive funds available that the county can apply for. And that's why this agency is encouraging to partner with other agencies. So that's why there is a three county partnership that we are potentially going for. We don't know much yet about what it looks like, but we have this upcoming meeting. And these grants are focused on reducing the emissions. They will not be utilizing county funds. These are external funds. And to address Chair Harrington comments as well, this will not only act local, so the intention of the collaboration with other agencies is to allow that more areas can reduce GHG, because as you mentioned, it doesn't make sense to have only one region reducing GHG while the others are not doing any efforts. And that's why the collaboration with other counties that are already taking action to reduce their GHG emissions is very important to think about and take into consideration. Thank you.
So through the Tri-County Chairs discussion a week ago, Monday, what was that, February 27th, we already signaled Clackamas County is taking the lead in getting the letter submission to the EPA for a three-county approach. Yeah, so I think what we can expect is that the team will be coming back to us with some further information in the next 2-3 months relative to the questions that we've asked for and the additional information we're looking for. Yes, Commissioner Treese.
I'd like to make a last comment for me, and that is I've learned I've learned several things today and it's cleared up some of my confusion. Number one, I agree with Chair from the standpoint that Roy, you haven't changed your position, but I also don't agree with your position. So I'm just going to say that greenhouse gas emission is at the level that we need to be concerned about. And
Well, I agree too. I just think there's other things too, in addition.
well, okay, so I just want to say that. Number two, it was the discussion about we haven't been doing mitigation, I was confused and it all of a sudden it became clear to me when you said we haven't been doing community mitigation. Because I would look and say, well, we've done the fuel problem, we've done these other things, but you're absolutely right. It's been operationally focused. I like the idea of the tri-county approach. But I will again say that I believe in that community feedback. I don't believe in the community running the programs, and that would be the extreme. But at the same time, I do think that's why we're elected. That's why we're here. And so I continue to say I would like to see that community engagement. Thank you. And thank you for your work. And Robin, good luck to you.
Thank you for your input, questions, feedback, board. Staff will follow up, taking, I'll kind of say a further dive into our, which it's great, we're still on this slide, the planning timeline and moving forward and address some of your questions. And I just want to give appreciation for the team for the work that they've put in today, coming forward and just thinking of possibilities and how we continue to move this work forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's see. I don't think we have anything more on our agenda today. Has anything come up that we need to attend to before we adjourn?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, well then, with that, our work session is adjourned.